You Can't Outrun a Redcap by Mark Leney, performed by Otis Jiry. You can't outrun a redcap had been the old man's advice to Matt and I before we went hiking up Red Hill. Don't even try. He had then told us that we probably would have been better off not going up to the ruins on Red Hill at all. Looking back now, I wish we had listened, but at the time, Matt and I were pretty determined to go to those ruins. Looking back now, I wish we had listened. But at the time, Matt and I were pretty determined to go to those ruins. It was the only place where we knew that we would definitely find a Fritillaria meleagris, a rare wildflower. It is, apparently, the most exotic wildflower that can be found on the British Isles. You're probably wondering, why is this flower so important to two young guys, such as Matt and myself? It was all about a girl. Isn't it always? Matt and I had been friends since we met in middle school. We were nigh on inseparable, and did a lot of things together. Our teachers at school used to make us sit apart from each other, because when we were together we could cause a lot of trouble. When we graduated from school, we both went to college, then to university together. It helped that we both wanted to be lawyers, so that we pretty much took all the same classes. We both wanted to go into business and start our own law firm when we left uni. It was during a night out at uni that we both laid eyes upon the beauty that would threaten to come between us. Her name was Natalie, and she was a gorgeous, curvaceous girl of African-Caribbean descent with smooth dark skin, the color of the best kind of chocolate, and black braids that snaked over her shoulders like a more beautiful and alluring version of Medusa. Just like Medusa, she bespelled us with her eyes, and Matt and I decided right there and then that one of us would win her heart. It was a friendly rivalry. We agreed that whomever of us she chose, the loser would back down gracefully. So it was a may the best man win scenario, and each of us was determined to be that best man. That night, we met Natalie. We both bought her drinks and chatted her up. She was friendly and glad of our company, and certainly didn't send us on our way. Maybe if she had rebuked us both, then it would have ended there and gone no further. As it was, we were both encouraged by her willingness to talk to us and spend time with us. On that first occasion, though, we did not get any clear indication as to which one of us she preferred. While we talked to her, we found out a little bit about her, what she liked, what she was studying, that sort of thing. One of the things that came up was her love of rare wildflowers. Apparently, Natalie loved to collect them. There was one especially rare one that was missing from her collection. That's right, you guessed it. The rare flower she was missing was none other than Fritillaria meleagris. The following day, after our first fateful encounter with Natalie, Matt and I met in the pub. There were no classes that day, thank God. And we did some research online using the free Wi-Fi in order to find out as much as we could about Fritillaria meleagris. It was our intention to find one for Natalie and present it to her as a gift, but we would make it a race. Whoever got her one of the flowers first and gave it to her could be the one to consider to pursue her and try to win her favor. We had already shaken hands on this agreement, and finding a picture of the flower in question online was the simplest of things. It was a pretty-looking thing, with its bell-shaped flower and speckled petals in different shades of purple. What the internet didn't tell us was where we could find one. That was when the old man sitting alone in the corner of the pub got involved. From where he was sitting, he could see the screen of Matt's laptop, and the picture of the beautiful rare flower must have caught his eye. "I know where you can find one of them," he piped up, but almost immediately after having said it, he seemed to regret it, because he tried to sink down into his chair in some vain attempt and effort to become invisible. Matt and I looked at him with excitement in our eyes. We got up from our table and went over to sit with the old man. "You don't mind if we join you, sir?" Matt asked as he took the seat next to the man. "It's a free country," the old man replied noncommittedly. "Can we buy you a drink?" I asked him. "Now, I won't say no to a drink if you're offering." The man's eyes lit up and a slight smile touched his lips, but it was quickly vanished again. I asked him what he was drinking before going to the bar to fetch it. When I returned, I placed the drink down in front of them and took up the seat at his other side. "Can you really tell us where to find one of these?" Matt was asking him, pointing to the flower on the laptop as he spoke. The old man took up the pint of ale I had bought him and took a long gulp from it that left the glass half full when he put it down again. He smacked his lips together and let out a satisfied sigh before venturing to answer. "I could," he said evenly. "I'm just not sure about whether I should." Matt and I looked at each other over the old man's shoulder as if to say, "Is this guy crazy?" "Why is that, sir?" I wondered. "I'm not sure you'd believe me if I told you," the man replied cryptically. "Try us," I said with a smile. "I'm pretty open-minded about a lot of things." The old man took another pull of the ale, which emptied the glass this time. He sat there in silence for a moment, considering whether or not to tell us, I supposed. "Can I get you another drink?" Matt offered. The old man shook his head. "You can find that flower growing in only one place in these parts, and that's in the ruins of the old abbey up on Red Hill," he told us. "Why is it called Red Hill?" I had to ask. "Red Hill," the old man began obligingly, "is so called because of the local legend that tells of a redcap that lives there." "What's a redcap?" It was Matt's turn to ask. "A redcap is a type of goblin or fairy from folklore. They are murderously territorial and will slaughter anyone that trespasses into wherever they call their home. They dip their caps into the blood of those they kill, which is what gives them their name, and they have to kill often because if their blood in their cap were ever to dry out, then they would die," the old man told them. "That's just a story, though, right? There isn't really a goblin up there murdering hikers left, right, and center. We'd hear about it," Matt answered with an air of certainty. "Wouldn't we?" That last part was not so certain. "There have been reports of hikers going missing in the vicinity of Red Hill over the years. None of them have ever been found. Once the redcap lays eyes on you, then that's it. You can't outrun a redcap. Don't even try," the old man warned us. "If I were you, I'd forget about finding this flower and stay away from Red Hill, you hear?" If only we had listened. Would you have believed a story about a murderous fairy? We didn't either, so that's why Matt and I decided to go ahead and pay a visit to the ruins of Red Hill anyway. The plan was to find the flower and pick out one each. Whichever one of us got our flower back to Natalie first would be the winner. What could possibly go wrong? Now, Matt and I didn't get to go on our excursion to Red Hill until Saturday. We decided to make a day of it, carrying a picnic with us, which we could stop and eat when we got hungry. I had also printed out a picture of the flower that we were looking for as a visual reference, just so we would be certain that we were getting the right one. It was a beautiful day, with the warmth of the sun glowing down on us and birds singing and flitting in the hedgerows that we passed on our walk up the country road that led out of town. Red Hill was a 90-minute walk from the town according to the Google Maps reference we had looked at the night before on my iPhone. I had printed a copy of that map too, as I didn't hold out much hope of getting a Wi-Fi or GPS signal out in the countryside away from civilization as we knew it. The route was pretty straight most of the way, with only a few, very few turns. Matt and I walked along, mostly in silence, enjoying the beauty of the countryside. The lush green fields, butterflies, languorous cows squinting at us as we walked on by. Occasionally we would trash-talk each other about which of us was going to win, but nothing serious. You know, the ironic thing is that after all this, she might not be interested in either one of us. Matt chuckled at one point as we crested a particularly steep hill. True, but I have to say that I'm rather enjoying this walk, getting out and about in nature instead of sitting in a pub for a change. Whatever happens, I won't regret we did this, I told him. Me neither, Matt agreed. He stopped walking then and pointed up ahead. I looked where he was pointing and saw over in the next field a tall green hill, almost steep and high enough to qualify as a small mountain. On the summit of that hill could be seen the ruins of some old medieval building. It had to be the Abbey on Red Hill. I looked at the map, and it agreed with my assumption. There it is, I remarked. Matt made his way to the gate that led to the field and climbed over it. Last one to the top buys the drinks when we get back, he said with a grin before taking off at a run towards the hill. Hey, get back here, you little shit, I laughed. I climbed over the gate and ran after him as fast as I could. Matt was halfway up the hill, bent over with his hands on his knees, gasping to catch his breath when I caught up with him. I would have overtaken him if it were not for the fact that I needed to stop and catch my breath, too. How about we just walk the rest of the way? I suggested between breaths. Sounds good to me. Matt agreed with a grin. Once we were both suitably composed, we recommenced our ascent of Red Hill. You're buying the drinks, though, Matt chided lightly. Whatever, I threw back at him with a dry sneer. We walked the rest of the way in silence. The ruins of the Abbey were scattered about the perimeter of the hill's summit in a roughly rectangular shape, giving an idea of the basic outline of the building that had once stood there proudly hundreds of years ago. Within this rectangle, some of the interior walls still stood in places, suggesting there were different rooms in the Abbey where it once lay. The stones were all dark and gray, overgrown with moss and lichen. Even the inner floor of the Abbey had long since been reclaimed by nature, covered in an unmown carpet of grass and weeds, with the occasional explosion of color provided by flowers. At first glance, as we stood in the crumbled archway entrance to the ruins, Matt and I didn't see any sign of the Fritillaria Maligris. We passed under the arch and into the carcass of the ruined abbey to begin our search. I wonder what happened to this place that they allowed it to fall into such disrepair, I remarked as I trod carefully through the overgrown greenery, scanning the ground as I went for a sign of the flower. Maybe they were all chased away by the Redcap, Matt replied with a snicker. Don't be ridiculous, I snorted. You can't outrun a Redcap, remember? I winked at him as I added that last part. It was then that I heard a sound coming from behind one of the broken-down walls ahead of us. What was that? I asked quietly. What was what? Matt wondered. Clearly he hadn't heard anything. It sounded like someone cutting into something with a knife or something, I explained. Then there came a rhythmic dripping sound, like something thick but wet splashing onto something. Tell me what you hear. Did you hear that? I whispered, not knowing why I wanted to keep my voice as low as possible. That I hear. Matt nodded back to me, and I noticed that he was whispering, too. What do you think it is? I wondered. Maybe it's just some water dripping down from a stone somewhere, Matt suggested. It hasn't rained all week. Where would the water come from? Besides, that doesn't explain the cutting sound I heard, I hissed. You heard that, not me, Matt threw back. You're letting that Redcap story get to you. It's nothing. Maybe we should go back. I'm buying the drinks, remember? I suddenly wasn't all that concerned about finding the Fritillaria meleagris. I'm not leaving here without that flower, unless you want to stand aside and let me take a shot at Natalie, Matt sneered. Come on, Matt, let's just go, I insisted. The drip-dripping sound could still be heard from behind the wall, but it was starting to slow down now, with longer gaps between each drip. Before I could stop him, Matt stepped forward and walked beyond the wall to investigate the sound. I bet you it's nothing, he began, but he got no further than that. He just stood there, past the wall, looking at something that I couldn't see. His eyes had widened and his mouth had dropped open, the lips still moving, but no words were coming out. I walked over beside him against my better judgment, I assure you, and looked to see what had so effectively grasped his attention. Standing over in the corner was a little man, wearing heavy iron shoes with pointed toe caps. He was about the height of a tall 6-year-old child, and was wearing a dirty brown jerkin and trousers that looked like they were made out of some sort of animal skin, like a rabbit or maybe even a fox. His skin looked as coarse and rough as sandpaper, and was a light pale gray color. He had big round eyes with sickly yellow irises and a long nose that was slightly bent in the middle, as if someone had taken hold of it and snapped it. His mouth was wide and big and twisted into a sadistic, satisfied smile. Tiny, razor-like teeth protruded slightly from his lower lip, and at one point a long, deep pink tongue snaked out and caught a stray drop of blood that dripped by his mouth. The blood was what had been causing the drip-dripping sound we had heard, and it was coming from the severed stump of a rabbit's neck. The rabbit was being held aloft over the little man's head, so that the blood from the stump would drip onto the peaked cap that sat upon the man's otherwise hairless head. Blood had saturated the cap right through, so it was practically sticking like glue to the man's skull. A long pike with a wickedly sharp, blood-stained blade attached, its wooden shaft twice as long as its bearer, leaned against the wall just within reach of the Redcap, for there could be no doubt. This was undoubtedly the Redcap that Matt and I had been warned about. I don't think it's seen us yet, I whispered to Matt, barely able to control the tremor in my voice. I should have kept my mouth shut, because that was the precise moment that the Redcap decided to turn and look at us with a wicked smile that suggested that he'd known we were there all along. "Run!" I shouted. Matt and I took off as fast as we could, making a beeline for the archway we'd come in by. I made it through the arch when I heard Matt's voice behind me. "I can see it! I can see the flower!" I turned my head to see him veering off, away from the archway, towards some unseen corner of the Abbey. The Redcap was already closing in on him. I didn't want to see what happened next, so I turned to the front again and kept on running. Funny how it was faster going down the hill than it had been going it up. It's true what the old man said. You cannot outrun a Redcap.